Hello, I'm glad to share the exhibition Accompanied, the artwork of Marilyn Pappas and Silsberg-Ackerman with you. I'm Meg Rotzel, the curator of exhibitions at the Radcliffe Institute. You're watching an edited version of an online public tour of the exhibition that were held with the artists during the fall of 2020 and the winter of 2021. And I'm recording this introduction in March 2021. The online exhibition presents a pair of artists whose work was transformed by an abiding friendship. Pappas and Slosburg-Ackerman, both fellows at the Radcliffe Bunting Institute in the 1980s, have sustained a conversation over 4 decades about artistic endeavor, studio practice, and pedagogy. The artists were members of the founding group of the Brickbottom Artists Building, one of the country's first artist-developed live-work buildings, and are professors emeriti at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. They have worked in adjoining studios for more than 30 years and have taught generations of artists. The exhibition opened on Monday, September 21st, 2020, and I encourage you to check out the event video of the opening discussion featuring the artists and Maggie Doherty, author of The Equivalents, a story of art, female friendship, and liberation in the 1960s. Okay, let's start. Here at the Radcliffe Institute, we promote art as a form of advanced study and engagement by commissioning artists and organizing curatorial projects that reach across disciplines and engage with communities within and beyond Harvard. And as we begin this program, I'd like to say a little bit about the image that you see on your screen. It was created for this exhibition by both artists. It's titled Accompanied, Two Views of the Sea. The drawing was made by Marilyn and the frame by Jill. And the frame surrounds and supports the image, and the image gives center to the frame. And both elements look to the sea for subject matter, and they sit alongside each other in contrast and harmony, much like the artists themselves. And this exhibition marks the 60th anniversary of the Bunting Institute. So the Bunting Institute was the forerunner of today's Radcliffe, named for the president of Radcliffe College, Mary Ingram Bunting. It was a postgraduate study center for women scholars and artists that provided time, financial and institutional support, and membership in a vital community of women. That part is key. Jill and Marilyn were both Bunting Fellows in the 1980s, and their work exemplifies the transformative friendships that the Bunting sparked amongst its community. When this exhibition was first conceived, we expected it, of course, to happen in the gallery. Once the pandemic hit in spring of 2020, we moved it online for safety. As I began the online exhibition, my way of selecting artwork and arranging it and thinking about it changed a lot. Suddenly, I wasn't thinking about telling a story in a gallery using artwork. I needed to tell a story through artwork online. And so we safely photographed the adjoining studios of the artists. And at the same time, the theme of friendship became central to the exhibition, not only because of the artists' relationship to one another, but because our social relationships were undergoing a major change while we were quarantined. If you haven't already, please take some time following this program to view more images of the artwork on the exhibition website, and check out the pages that directly address women's friendships. But first, a little bit more about the artists. So I met Jill almost 15 years ago in her studio, and then consequently Marilyn. I was hired about 5 years ago to oversee Radcliffe's exhibition program. And during my first week at work, I discovered one of Marilyn's artworks on the wall in the dean's office. And a while later, a box was delivered to my office with one of Jill's artworks inside. So this artwork has been a long time, or this exhibition has been a long time coming. Now, I'm pleased to share the accomplishments of the artists. Marilyn Pappas is based in Somerville, Massachusetts. She creates large-scale textile works developed from sculptures of ancient goddesses. The three-dimensional figures stand at the intersection of sculpture and garment and imagine ancient artworks as they evolve and survive over centuries. Although broken, faded, and disintegrating, the works are metaphors for the strength and power of women in the Me Too era. Her work has been exhibited in many galleries and museums during the course of her over 60-year career, including the Curator Museum of Art, the De Cordova Sculpture Park and Museum, the De Young Museum, Fuller Craft Museum, the Hazley Institute of Contemporary Art, the HUB Robeson Galleries at Pennsylvania State University, the Cranart Art Museum, the Museum of Arts and Design, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, and the Staten Island Museum. She is Professor Emerita at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, where she taught from 1974 to 1994. Jill Silsberg-Ackerman is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Jill's metaphysical, hybrid wood sculptures, installations, and drawings made from discarded furniture, sawdust, and wood scraps emanate from an examination of natural forms and phenomena. Originally from Omaha, Nebraska, she is inspired by the pragmatism of the pioneers who settled the Great Plains, material culture, and the history of art. Her work has been exhibited in numerous galleries and museums, including the Cohen Art Center at Tufts University, the Concord Art Center for the Visual Arts, the Cummings Art Galleries at Connecticut College, the De Cordova Sculpture Park and Museum, the Fuller Craft Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts Boston, the Nightingale Brown House at Brown University, the Rose Art Museum, UMass Dartmouth, and the Worcester Art Museum. She is Professor Emerita at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design, where she taught from 1974 to 2018. Her book, Restless Shelves, Sycophant, is forthcoming. So next, we'll hear an excerpt from my conversation with each artist selected from their online public tours during fall 2020 and winter 2021.
The thing about a piece of furniture is it has a history. It represents certain ideas or certain styles, and it's also a context for me. I found that drop front arts and crafts desk in pieces on the street in Somerville. A drop front desk has a very strong diagonal, and that seemed like a wonderful place to rest something. So that was a hunch, a wonderment. Where do I put this? The other thing is that I ultimately put this desk together, and what holds it is the rope. Without that rope, this would fall down, and the desk fell down on me a lot. So the rope was to stop getting hurt by this thing as I was working on it. But at a certain point, I understood that's a subject. And that's part of the title, Imminent Collapse. And the ascent is the cloud, the particles. And because of that diagonal line in the desk, it's built into the work. This cloud, buoyant, I could think about something buoyant, floating, because of the gift of the diagonal plane.
That's deeply beautiful to me. And without that language, like seeing this come together, that this cloud here seems impossible. It seems entirely impossible that it could do this. And that also, Jill, that you've noted that it leans to one side. So really what's holding this all together is this rope and the turnbuckle that tightens it. And that also it has this arm that seems like a stay also. So this is a very precarious piece of sculpture because of that tension that is held, but it also has such a lightness to it. It's so beautiful. Last time we were speaking about this, you were talking about the honesty of material. Can you tell me about those materials, those honest materials that you use within this artwork, but also throughout your artworks?
So some of those pieces, if you look carefully, there's one that I love because it has a little pink on it. And
Yeah,
they're
right here.
Yeah, there's the pink, and they're not perfect, but they're my history.
Yeah.
So there's the history of where this was, there's the history of arts and crafts, there's the history of sculpture, there's the history of my own studio.
Yeah.
So that's a part of being explicit. There's no magic. What you see is what is there.
What is wonderful about this work, Jill, and the much of your work, I think, is this that your work is in many ways based in language, but also so remarkably based in the intuitive language of object and of material. And I see that, um, and I've been fortunate to see that grow, to see this element get added, and then this element get added, and then hear this field. And could you talk a little bit about ideas of space?
Just in the most blunt way, I kept thinking to myself, I want to make a place, not a thing.
Uh-huh.
So the first part was to put the horizontal on the wall because I was making a place. That's the slightest way that I
Yeah.
could suggest for myself a horizon line. And then to just extend, I mean, there were some pragmatic reasons for the beginnings of the platform, but again, it extended the idea of a place, of states of being, a state of mind. And yet I will say that if you could see more, the felt is like a patchwork. And what it rests on is also a patchwork of brown wrapping paper.
Yeah.
It was a part of the making of the work. So again, it's honoring my process.
Yeah.
But I started to understand that that felt, that patchwork was another iteration of the objects that are joined, the wooden pine pieces, that they're put together in a certain
Right.
way, a kind of fluttery way, and they're coming at you, they're explosive. But when you look down, there's more of a quilt, something of repose, but they share that kind of stuttering, coming together of planar forms.
If you could discuss this relationship between the activity or noise of the desk and the silence or whispering of the field of felt.
I think it's a dissipation.
Hmm.
And yes, it's quieter. It's the how contemplation can be invited
Hmm.
into the work and time. This piece took, I don't know, 5 years. It was hard to
Yeah.
work through, and so there is time in it. And I think I was in a different place in the work,
Right.
and uh, the horizontal is so different from the diagonal or the vertical. And so, and of course, the horizontal is more of a place of repose.
I was wondering if we wanted to take a look at, you referred to this taking years to make, but I'm going to look at your mother drawing and I'd like to talk about that for a little bit. So this is the mother drawing for Blossfeld, Rietveld, Silsberg-Ackerman. And I thought maybe when we looked at this, we could talk about what is represented in this drawing and how that drawing, how it interacts with the trinity of, I would say, sculptural elements that you have.
I made this in 2010, so before I ever thought about the sculpture that would come later. And I I was so interested in these two artists and their work. The
Mhm.
work of the credenza is by Gerrit Rietveld, who uh, belonged to a very severe approach to the world, but pragmatic furniture. And then the lower work is my photograph, or my of a photograph of Karl Blossfeld,
Mhm.
who was a German artist who wanted to be a sculptor. He was teaching drawing and started making photographs of the materials that he was showing to his students out of frustration because the plant material kept changing and changing and changing.
Yeah.
He became celebrated for the photographs, less so. I've only seen one or two sculptures. So that tension between a very geometric form and an organic form was very interesting to me, that kind of juxtaposition. I just tossed that off. What always happens for me, and that's why I call these the mother drawings, is that they contain something for the future.
Yeah.
They're adumbrations for something that's on my mind.
One
Or
of the reasons why I love looking at your work, because I feel like I learn along with you, and that like it shows me that it takes time to have ideas, and artwork can have one meaning at one time and then change throughout time.
for a long time, this piece was called Blossfeld Rietfeld. But over time, and some of you know this, but it was started when my husband was healthy. He
Mhm.
became very ill and he died. And over time, I had to accept a certain autobiographical responsibility, or I had a certain recognition that this was not only about Blossfeld Rietfeld, but it was about Slosberg and Ackerman.
Yes.
And so the the title changed over time because I learned more over time.
And even yesterday when we were talking about this presentation, I learned something new about this work and about that Slosberg-Ackerman part of the title. And this is what I'm so grateful to artwork, giving us this way in to kind of living our, like, or just learning about ourselves, but then also it's an entire, like, it is as much Blossfeld-Rietfeld as it is Slosberg-Ackerman, which is beautiful.
I became interested in doing these figures from my travels, from admiring the broken statues that I saw in Mediterranean countries. And you go up to those statues and they're missing their arms and their heads or whatever, and you say, "Oh, isn't that beautiful?"
Mhm.
And it is. And so I started doing these stitched figures. They were two-dimensional until just recently. And I thought of them as really being about the power and beauty and vulnerability of women, and of aging as well, because I am doing them in my probably last decade of work. I was working with fabric and thread and also found objects. And I had been working with the idea of collage, with fabric collage and assemblage, and using a lot of clothing and clothing parts in my work. So even though I wasn't using the actual figure, I think as I look back that I was inferring the figure by the use of these garments. The front is all hand stitched. It's like a drawing because I'm just using thread instead of a pencil or a pen or whatever. The back is all about what happens over time. And what happened to these statues over time is that there was a lot of destruction and aging and falling apart. And so I chose to show that by the stitching coming unstitched.
And can you tell me about the titling that you wrote, Nevertheless She Persisted?
It talks about just keeping on, not giving up, being patient or impatient, but staying in there with the game. And also, I mean, all that we put up with, and especially I was thinking about women
Mhm.
who, like me, have had multiple roles in life as a teacher, a mother, a wife, a single parent,
Mhm.
an artist, all of those things, trying to juggle all of those things at different times. But nevertheless,
Yeah.
I always worked and I always persisted. So that's why it seems so appropriate to me.
Yeah. And that reminds me of something that I think we've talked about over the last couple of months of how inspiring it is for me to understand that trajectory of one's life and career, and also career in being a mother, being a partner, and being an artist, is that there are times for different parts of your life to kind of blossom, and that the studio that you have, that I think of as a long-term studio, almost 30 years, but you were in your 50s when you secured this studio space, correct?
Right. I had spent several years either having uh, a studio in my house or not having a studio at all. Uh, I think I worked for probably 20 years before I even had a studio. I worked in my bedroom or in another room in the house. And that's why working with fabrics worked for me. It was something I could actually do.
Yeah.
And I think that takes away a lot of the frustration. I know when I was teaching, I would always emphasize to students that they do something that they can physically and mentally do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's so frustrating to be trying to use a material that you can't use because you don't have the right equipment or something like that. That's why I've always thought that was important. And then before I um, got the studio with Jill at Brickbottom,
Mhm.
I had been renting studios in Boston, and then gentrification would come
Mhm.
and the rent would go up and I would be out. So it was a massive step when Jill and I actually bought our studios.
Yes. And you were able to do it because you could do it together. And I think that that is really a good lesson to hear, and that you did it together through the artist association. So you in fact needed an entire community in order to build something. I think that the conditions of work, as you're saying, um, impact what you can do. And just knowing that there are these moments, like there's a tempo to one's life and a tempo to what can be produced, and then it also just requires those around you in order to make these beautiful artworks.
Although I have an idea when I start, the work changes.
Hmm.
I mean, I have to be open to things happening that I don't expect, and especially with the stitching, uh, I can't really uh, know what it's going to look like until I do it. I used to worry that I wasn't going to last long enough after I retired to get my just desserts. But I've been retired now for over 20 years and I've been a full-time artist and it's wonderful.
I hope you enjoyed the conversations with the artists. In our last moments together, I encourage you to visit the exhibition website so you can see more about the artist's work and their relationship. If you navigate to the friendship page, You may listen to a conversation between Marilyn and Jill, guided by Shruti Venkata, an undergraduate at Harvard, about their friendship. Read the publication centered on friendship, authored by Anya Ventura, a writer based in Los Angeles. And see images from the artist's shared studio. In the Learn More and Participate section, there are some guiding questions, podcasts, reading, and resources around friendship. You can sign up to receive a copy of the publication with an essay by Anya. Do that soon because we have limited supplies, but we can also send you a PDF. And finally, check in with your friends. Thanks so much for joining me.